Look at the state of the country and the world right now. And I think that's so much of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole empty cup analogy that is so prevalent right now, but you can't fill your cup if you have nothing to fill it with, right? Like it starts with you. How do we cultivate safety for ourselves, for our kids? How do we build a home that we're happy to come home to? How do we feel at home in our bodies so that we can do all the things and go out from there? That's kind of my vision. What does home mean to everybody? And how do we create that? Because if we don't feel safe somewhere, first in our bodies and then ideally in a space, then how do we create any magic from there?
I am Lisa Roers, former executive coach turned podcaster and digital course creator. Just a few years ago, my typically unwavering optimism was put to the test when my autoimmune system went sideways and handcuffed my dreams to positively impact the world. Fast forward, though, through years of failed experiments, dozens of doctors, and countless hours of research, and I am now a healthy, thriving CEO of a business that is positively impacting the world by empowering people to exchange fear for fortitude and dis-ease for durability. I created the Sunshine Cafe podcast to give you strategies to be your best self-advocate so you can focus on the things which light you up. If you're looking for hope and encouragement to live a life you love, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. Today, my guest is Kathryn Garland. Kathryn wears two badges most proudly, being a wife and a mother, and she's always wanted to fill those two roles. She is blessed with 4 amazing children, is a teacher by training, and now is a homeschooling mama. She's a lifelong learner and living the life she's dreamed of while being a farmer's wife in British Columbia, Canada. In addition to being a mom and a wife, Kathryn's passion is being a homemaker. She enjoys teaching others about the power of the home and the possibilities that come from having a safe, grounded space, which includes the physical dwelling, as well as the safety and the groundedness in our relationships with others and ourselves. There is truly magic in the midst when these gifts, which are often ignored or left unattended, come together. Kathryn's podcast, called Homespun, Create the Life You Crave, is giving people encouragement, ideas, and ways to enhance everything in their lives, from homesteading and parenting to self-compassion and decor. I'm really excited to have this beautiful soul with us today. I hope you'll enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Let's dive in. Kathryn, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for that lovely, warm welcome. I'm looking forward to this so much.
Good. Well, I know you and I have had a few conversations now, and I've loved all of them, including so many different side conversations that we could go down today. But for the benefit of our listeners, let's give them a little bit of your background and help them understand this beautiful picture of who you are and how you kind of got to doing a podcast and what that podcast is all about, because that'll help them understand some of the fun things that you're working on.
Yeah. What a journey, right? Everything's a journey, and everything kind of led me here. I really, truly believe. So I'm a wife, I'm a mama to 4, and those are my proudest badges that I wear. I'm also a homesteader, farmer, whatever you want to call it. And I'm a teacher by trade. I did teach in the school system and outside of the school system for, I don't know, a decade-ish. That's a hard one to remember. And then I'm just an avid lifelong learner, always looking for different courses and programs and things to like expand my mind. And along with that, I'm a lover of experimenting on myself and my family within reason, of things that are going to work for us in every aspect of life. So just to speak to that, I got my real estate license at one point. I went to school for traditional Chinese medicine. I didn't finish. Just all kinds of dabbling here and there. When I finished teachers college, I kind of just announced to my husband, by the way, I'm not applying for any local jobs. I'm applying for jobs abroad. Oh, everything I do is a bit of a wild ride, but strap in. I guess you're coming along if you're in my life. I don't know. And that's just how I am. I'm like full speed ahead. Like we bought our property, and within, I would say probably 10 or 11 months, we had like ducks, chickens, cows, pigs, and rabbits at one speed. And it's fast and like that way, right? So, and that's how you do everything. So We homeschool our family. We do the homesteading thing. I love preserving and whatnot, but I do not love gardening. So I don't grow nearly as much as I preserve. I do outsource a lot of my produce because gardening and I are not friends yet. But we do animal husbandry primarily here, and then some gardening, but more fruit than veg is where I like to be, because the fruit mostly takes care of itself, in my opinion. So that's kind of like a whirlwind, me in a nutshell. I'm not sure which direction to go from there. Yeah.
Oh, well, my goodness, that's a lot in its own right. Having 4 beautiful kiddos and a homestead and farming and all the different. I love your phrase to experiment on self and family within reason,
Yeah.
with the caveat on that. I'm curious, tell me a little bit more about what you don't like about gardening, because you seem to have so many other areas that you like experimenting. And so what did gardening do that ruined the mojo?
Okay. My aunt, who's a very avid gardener, and I had this conversation once, and she went, "No, you're wrong." But I feel like gardens don't talk to me. An
Oh,
animal, if it needs something, makes a lot of noise, but I can't tell what the carrot's doing under the ground. So I don't necessarily know what it needs. And I think that's my holdup is I don't love weeding. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I would happily prep a garden for someone else to then tend it. It's not the dirty. I can't, vegetables and I just don't communicate very well, I guess. I don't know. I can't read
wow.
them. And my aunt says they do talk to you though. You just this. I'm like, not
Yeah.
everybody's meant for everything.
It's- you need to learn the language of Veggie Tales.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy VeggieTales. It's pretty funny, but they talk a lot louder than the vegetables in a garden do.
So true. So true. So there are probably some telltale signs that the vegetables, like your sister was saying, could tell you if we knew what to watch for. I'm not a huge gardener yet myself either, although I am similar to you in that I like to dabble and experiment here and there as much as I can. And I learned a very funny, I'll tell you this quick little story, then we'll get back to you because it's not about me at all. But I had a raised garden this year on my deck. And because you mentioned carrots, and I planted my carrots, I was so excited to harvest them at the end of the year. Problem was, I put not enough dirt in my raised bed on the deck. So I had these short little squatty carrots that kind of like curled as they hit the bottom of the garden. It was hilarious. They were the funniest looking carrots ever. We laughed. We laughed a lot.
That's a really fun experiment though, right? Like
It was. Yeah, it
and look
was.
at what they did. Like nature's so cool. Like it figured out a way to so cool.
Yeah, they did. They got denser and denser and like corkscrewed their way down as they got stuck in the bottom of my on deck garden box. But anyway, hilarious. So yeah, you do have to like be willing to try and fail multiple times as you learn your way, or do more research. I didn't do probably enough research before I started. It seems like these days we have access to so many tools to help us learn. So the number one critical factor is having the desire, which you have this beautiful desire to keep trying different things. So
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into the preservation or preserving things that you do get from the garden, because you said that you really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, that was a bit of a, when we first bought this property and there were some established garden beds that needed a little bit of love. And then we did some raised beds ourselves that just, so we could put all the goodness in there without having to, we're on sand. So you can only go so far down before you have to really do stuff that we just didn't have the time for. So we did some raised beds as well. So we could put in the compost, the manure and all the things. And my first garden was basically a disaster. I did tons of research and I have some really avid gardener friends that I was asking for advice, and I don't know, I didn't talk to them enough. Who knows what I didn't do? But in the like, here's your checklist of what you should do, I ticked all the boxes, but not a single one of my tomatoes ripened. So we're making like green tomato relish, and my corn were all baby corn, but too tough to really pickle for like baby corn. It was just, I grew a lot of pig food that year. And it was really disheartening because I grew so much planning to preserve so much, because when we got here, I was like, okay, I want to have this robust fruit cellar that I can go shopping in my basement through the winter. I didn't plan on never going to the grocery store. I just was like, I want this really good supplement to offset what we're buying from the store. So I had these like big ambitions that flopped, but I wasn't willing to give up the fruit cellar that I wanted. So I just started sourcing from other neighbors and other farms around here that did grow it all, because I just was determined to have that my first year here. It was like, that's why we wanted the land. We wanted the land to grow our own meat and to put up food for the winter. We wanted the space. So since I couldn't seem to master the gardening, I was like, I'm not giving this up. And so that first year, because I didn't spend so much time in the garden because everything was just not thriving, I went and I found a farm that they had worms in their cherries. So they were just giving them away. It was like you pick and you pay nothing, or you donate if you wanted. And so it was a really cheap way to get a ton of cherries. But then I was kind of like, I don't know what to do with this many cherries. I don't have enough freezer space for this. So I had the time because I didn't have the garden that was sucking up my time. I had the time to figure out the preserving. And so it was all that. And then it was kind of, okay, what do I really like? My mom wasn't a canner. So I was like, what did my grandma and my Oma put up that I really liked, that I'd like to have? And what do I really like from the store that I don't love the ingredients that I might be able to do myself? And it just spiraled, and I filled our fruit cellar that first year. And it was this thing where I was like, okay, we can never go back, because even just watching the kids be like, getting a basket to go downstairs to get what they're going to put in their lunches that day or what have you, it warmed my heart too much to ever just not do it. So it's now just become a mission of, I only really grow potatoes, garlic, and lettuce. It's really all I grow at this point. So sourcing everything else to fill the fruit cellar, from beans to peas to raspberries, because our raspberries are still young, so they're not producing tons, to just all the things to make the jams and the side dishes and the pickles, because I'm not a big pickle person, but everyone else in my family is. So if it can be pickled, they want it pickled and in the fruit cellar. And
okay. Well, and pickling things is so good. The fermenting process is so good for our gut and the microbiome. Those kinds of things are so healthy for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm loving the visual of your kids getting so excited to go downstairs and grab whatever might be for their lunch. I mean, what a great energy to start your day with. That's great.
Yeah, it's really fun. And then, we don't raise turkeys here, but they love turkey soup. So to put that in the fruit cellar, where did you get turkeys this year? And these giant turkeys that they're then saying, oh, look at all the soup we're going to get from that. It's just so fun to watch them.
Well, it's, it's such a beautiful gift, really, that you're giving your children to understand what the things that people go to the grocery store and buy, but they don't know if it came from a bush or a tree, or if it was underground or above ground, or how it was grown or harvested. And so to give that knowledge to your kids, to know what the thing is that they're eating and where it came from and how much work goes into it. I think once our kids understand that, they appreciate the food so much more, to know all the work that someone had to go into planting it, weeding it, nurturing it, harvesting it. All of those little steps make such a difference.
Well, and even just like one jar of peaches that we're going to have for dessert, right? Peaches are one of my favorite. Like, they are one of my favorite things to have in the fruit cellar, and one of my least favorite to can, because I don't know if you've ever canned peaches, but it's a lot of work to like blanch them and peel the skin and then quarter them and then the syrup. And it's just, I feel like I use every single pot I have in my house to do all the steps. And so them seeing that process, because it's also one of their favorite things to eat, but seeing how much work it is and how much mess it is, because the entire kitchen is a sticky mess when you're done, and you're washing like cupboards that you don't understand how it could possibly have gotten up so high. And so just for them to see all of that it's really good for them too. It gives a different appreciation for sure.
Yeah. So is it really wrong that I have great sense of comfort knowing that I'm not the only one who has food that gets stuck up on cupboards, and like how did it get there?
Right? I don't even like, you're like, I didn't splash, but it's up there. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, we're like, why is it 7 feet up in the air and I can't reach that high? How was it?
No,
how was that?
Definitely not alone.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I want to back up to one of the other things you had said, because I think our listeners who are laughing with us today are enjoying the conversation and understanding sometimes we have to source things from nearby farms. And as the food we get at the grocery store continues to kind of disappoint us, or as we start learning about all the different things that are in some of those things, that we want to start taking control and being some kind of a self-advocate or health advocate for ourselves, we might consider, well, I know like in Minnesota, there's a lot of farmers around us, but I wouldn't have the first clue for how to identify who they are, except for just walking up to them and knocking on their door, or what kind of farm, if they're an organic farm, if they're truly well sourced in a way that I would be happy with. So do you have any tips for our listeners on just how do you approach that seemingly really daunting topic?
So I worry a lot less about the organic label than a lot of people do. Do we eat organically? Is that important to us? Absolutely. but I don't worry about the certification because, for example, there was one farmer that we were told it was recommended to us to get their hay because their hay was certified organic. I don't do anything without talking to the farmer anymore. So I didn't just call this guy up and say, hey, I want a load of hay. Hey, I want a load of hay. I just heard that. Sorry. We didn't just call him up. We called and we said, okay, we heard you got great hay. What is it? What's your blend? What's your this? What's your that? Okay. And then in the conversation, it came up that his hay is certified organic, but he has an orchard that's right beside it that's not, because they do spray it, but they literally butt up against each other.
Interesting.
And so we went, how windy was it the day you last sprayed the orchard? Like all these sorts of things. So in the end, we did get some of his hay, but it's more finding the farmer. And I understand that's part of the problem, but it's more finding the farmer and then just talking to them. Like most farmers with warning are happy to talk to you. Like I have yet to find one who's like, I don't have time for this. They might say like, can I call you back in an hour? Or like, do you have time on the weekend to chat? But they're happy to talk because they're really proud of what they do. And they're really happy to share what's going on. And most of them will even let you come look around, especially if they're a smaller operation. As for finding them, just talking to anyone, like, are there any farmers markets? Talk to them. And I know that the farmers markets, you don't always see the farmer, but they can put you in touch with the farmer, get you their phone number, get you their email. If you have any friends who are as interested as you in the quality of the food, because it's just what you really need to do to be sure, in my opinion, is talk to the farmer. Because like I said, we're not certified. I have no intention of ever being certified, but every single thing I feed my animals, I'm asking them, like, did you grow it yourself? Where did you get it? What's it made of? What do you package it in? When did you cut your hay? Like all the things. And it's knowing those details that matter far more than just trusting a stamp that they put on a package. Because the standards, if you look them up too, the standards for organic are getting lower and lower and lower and lower, what they're allowed to call organic. So oftentimes I find that a farm that's not certified is actually cleaner. Like the one farm where we source some of our feed isn't certified, but the farmer delivers the feed to us. We've talked to him many times. He grows all of it himself. And I know what he tests, and he doesn't just have a stamp and tests I forget how often you have to test when you're organic, but he tests more frequently than you have to, and for more things than you have to be organic. So
interesting.
And understanding what questions to ask, obviously that's another hurdle, but they say they're no spray. Well, what do you use instead of spray? They say that they're organic. Awesome. What do you use for pest control? Do you do anything? Just the questions that feel like a kindergarten question, just ask them. You don't need to know exactly what machinery they use to harvest or what have you, unless you want to. Yeah. But, the kindergarten questions are the ones that are going to get the answers that are what you need.
That matter. The answers that really matter. I think that's such a beautiful recommendation. Reach out, have a conversation with the farmer and just get to know them. I think not only does it help you know your community better, gives you a sense for, what's happening around you. And it's a little work on the front side to kind of get to know who's who. But once you have those conversations, you can reward that farmer with your dollars and use your dollars as a vote for that farmer's produce in a way that you couldn't do by just buying it blindly at a grocery store that says it's organic, right?
And even if you're not going to be the one milking the cow or growing the cabbage or whatever the case may be, it really does give you more of a connection to what you're eating. Because sure, you're not the one who got your fingernails dirty digging up the cabbages, but you talked directly to the person whose fingernails got dirty digging up the cabbage. And then you might build a relationship where it's more expensive this year because we had slugs and we just couldn't control them. It gives you a different appreciation for what you're eating on a level that you can't put a value on.
Yeah. And you know what? I would not be as bothered paying extra for cabbage, knowing that Farmer Mike or Farmer Julie had issues with the crop and they had to charge more for it because they just don't have as much of it. Yeah. I think I'd almost feel more connected to the community, but also there's this mind, body, food connection thing that you then get because it's not just this random thing you just picked up off the shelf at the grocery store.
Exactly. Yeah. Somehow it feels more nourishing when you know the details.
So true. I love that. Relationship with the farmer versus just the certification. And some of those certification processes are, well, let's just, like you had said earlier, let's just acknowledge that almost any certification can be circumvented, or at least, you can game the system if you find a way to do it. But you can't really do that in a relationship. Once you get to know somebody and you understand their heart and intentions, you can really discern whether or not they're putting out a good product.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
So potatoes,
what you
garlic, and lettuce. All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to circle back. I'm going to need to circle back with you. I had a failure garlic year, but super funny.
I'm not an expert. I may have just gotten lucky. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll swap garlic notes someday.
Okay.
All right. So fast forward a little bit now, or maybe we rewind, one or the other. So you jumped into this course, and if you're like me, you have no idea even how I don't even know how I got in that course. My husband asked me, like, how did you get signed up for this course? I have no idea. But
right. Kind of the same.
Okay.
Because I did.
I did. I don't know. Somehow the universe, God wanted me to have that class. And I think actually it was his involvement in my case. But so you took this course and now you're kind of doing this podcast thing on Homespun. Tell us about that.
Homespun feels like it's probably my mission in life. It's where I was meant to get to. I always, even as a child, wanted to be a mom. What do you want to be when you grow up? A mom. And I was told, well, you have to have a career. And I remember thinking, why do I have to have a career? That is my job. I want to be a mom.
Amen.
And then it was all well, what if something happens to your husband? What if this, what if that? And I went, well, then I'll figure that out then. I just want to be a mom. So it feels like I was always meant to have, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. And I'm sure there's other people who want to be a mom in a career, and it's not to minimize anyone's journey. It's just that this was my path. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I wanted to have a bigger family. We have 4. That's not, 1 or 2, like a lot of people have or want. We wanted it on the bigger side. And Homespun to me is just about talking about building this home-centered life and whatever that looks like for you. So like for us, yes, it's homeschooling. For us, yes, it's homesteading. For us, yes, it's the 6 of us being home together most of the time. Great. But it's more about like, how do we cultivate safety for ourselves, for our kids? How do we build a home that we're happy to come home to? How do we feel at home in our bodies so that we can do all the things and go out from there? That's kind of my vision for the podcast, is really, what does home mean to everybody? And how do we create that? Because if we don't feel safe somewhere, first in our bodies, and then, ideally in a space, then how do we create any magic from there?
That is so beautiful. I love that. That is really beautiful. I love that you started with, you had always had a dream of being a mom. And it kind of breaks my heart that we have this society that thinks that that's not good enough. That I mean, it's quite frankly, it's the opposite. That is the most beautiful thing people could choose to just dedicate themselves to, because you are creating the future of the country, the world, the family. So why don't we honor that as much as we honor someone's desire to be CEO or CFO at a particular company? I think they both, like you said, they both have a place, but one is not less. We should not think less of somebody because they want to be quote unquote just a mom. I think being a home caregiver and a home caretaker is just such a beautiful calling. And unfortunately, I think so many young ladies are almost shamed into thinking that's not enough, like you said you were.
And I think of myself as a home maker, not as one word, but like a maker of the home, because it doesn't take care of itself. Sure, laundry doesn't do itself, floors don't mop themselves, all of those bits and pieces that we automatically take our brain to, but it's also like the atmosphere of our home doesn't take care of itself. You don't have family game night without making sure that you make time for family game night, whatever the case may be. Like, the home doesn't take care of itself, even in the ways that we take for granted.
So true. Well, and I think we're seeing that even in the fabric of our country, as that centered family unit is falling apart left and right. Yeah, it falls apart because it takes investment and it takes energy and it takes somebody focusing on it. And when you've got 2 parents that are going different directions and 3 or 4 kids or 1 or 2 kids who are both going their directions, all of a sudden now you've got 4 or 5 people going different directions and no connection in the middle.
And we worry so much about relationships outside of the home, but we don't worry about relationships in the home. At least that's my experience. That's my perception. And obviously it's tough to make blanket statements because, somebody's going to hear that and say, no, it matters to me. And it does matter to some people, of course. But I just feel like as a whole, as a generalization, on average, we're more concerned with how does our boss perceive us? How does our, friends that we're going out for dinner with on Friday night perceive us? How does our boyfriend, until they're our husband, perceive us? But then once you're sharing this space, we just take for granted that we all live under this one roof and it's going to be fine. We don't worry about cultivating relationships with our kids, with our spouse, with each other.
That's so true.
And the relationships are what make everything happen.
Yeah. Or make everything fall apart. Right.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that we talk about in the Sunshine Cafe is about health and how health is so connected. Everything we do affects our health, including and maybe even at the center is the relationship that we have with each other. You can really get some very sick bodies when you've got toxic relationships in your life. And heaven forbid, when those toxic relationships are living with you, that makes it even more difficult. But that doesn't happen overnight, right, Kathryn? It's like, that takes time to create that toxicity.
And effort. And so, and it takes effort that we just think it's, how did I get here?
Right.
But that's the work and that's the journey. And I think that so much of it starts in ourselves. Like how many of us have a really solid relationship with ourselves? How many of us are comfortable being completely alone, like actually alone? Right?
Yeah.
And that's where it starts, because how can you model a good relationship if you don't even have a good relationship with yourself? And we've all heard that, we talk so negatively to ourselves and, talk to yourself the way you talk to your best friend or to your mother or what have you, but we don't take it to heart.
Yes, you're so right. That is so true. I can just think about as you're talking, sweet friends of mine and myself who are prone to kind of beat myself up for different things instead of filling myself with the optimism and the encouragement that I so often want to give other people. And I love how you were saying that you have to have a good relationship with yourself before you can have a good relationship with others. And I'll add on to that I've always thought that you have to own yourself before you can give yourself away. It's like, I can't give you this pen that I'm holding in my hand if it's not mine. If I'm borrowing it from somebody else, I can't give this to you. So how do we claim to give ourselves fully to our spouses and our children and our families when we don't fully know and own ourselves? That's a really hard space to come from.
It really is. And I think that's part of, you were saying, look at the state of the country and the world right now. And I think that's so much of it, right? Is where everyone's that whole empty cup analogy that is so prevalent right now, but you can't fill your cup if you have nothing to fill it with, right? Like it starts with you, right? And I feel like it's been a couple of generations probably, or many generations, where we haven't learned how to take care of ourselves first, especially I feel as mothers, we're kind of conditioned to put everyone else first. Well, then you're not owning yourself. And how can I give them anything and put them first if I don't have an understanding of myself?
Yeah. Yeah, there's reasons those flight attendants tell us to put your mask on first before you put it on the neighbor next to you or a person next to you. This morning, actually, I just gave myself the gift of some morning self-care before I dove in and did everything else for other people. Sometimes it's hard to carve that out, especially if you're working outside of the house, but it's always worth it. And if you can't do it in the beginning of the day, it's important to find that time in the end of the day to carve out some margin for yourself. And I see so many of my friends who have every possible moment of their life double booked, if not single booked. And then there's no margin. There's no room on the sides for things to go, this got delayed and now everything else behind it gets delayed because there's no room for flexibility. And I think that creates a lot of stress. And I think that stress then puts a lot of pressure on relationships. And then that pressure on relationships starts to tear down the family. And it's just kind of that domino effect after that.
I feel like we really have to reflect on like, why is XYZ important? And just a little anecdote from my day. Our children go to an outdoor program 2 days a week. And today was one of their days. And Daddy was taking them today. And usually like 95% 5% of the time I take them. Daddy, we either do it together or it's just me. Daddy rarely does. And today he was taking them because I had some other stuff that I needed to do around the house and I just needed a little bit extra time. So it was just, he was doing it and they forgot. So 2 of my kids are in tears. One of my kids is sitting there with like arms crossed in a grump. One of them is just like overwhelmed at the thought of me not dropping them off because they forgot Daddy was doing it today. And remember, the 6 of us are home all the time. I like drop-offs. They do get teary because we're just not used to being apart.
Which is sweet in its own sense.
Right. It's, I waffle between like, and like, oh, I love it. But they were already late because just life happened this morning. So they're already late. And my one son and I both have it in us. We're like, late is well, it's not okay. And they're crying. And my husband's saying, can you go grab me a water bottle? And there's all this stuff happening. And I just like, I had to just stop and just like climb into the car and have extra long hugs. And they were really, really late then. But it was one of those moments where it's like, well, it's important for me to be on time to respect other people's times. I've already sent a note to the coordinators of the program saying they're going to be late. I didn't say how late they'd be. If I thought they were going to be 5 or 10, if they're going to be 20 or 30, does it affect their life at all? No, because they already know they're going to be late. They're already expecting them to be late. Fine. My oldest son, you're either on time or you're late. The amount of late isn't relevant to him. So we just had to like, why does it matter if we leave right now?
Yeah.
It
just
doesn't.
take a pause.
What matters is that they feel better about the drop off.
Yeah.
Right. So my point of this is just really focusing on why does something like this matter? Why does it matter that they're only 10 minutes late instead of 20?
Yeah.
So that the people who already know they're going to be late aren't mad. They already know they're going to be late. It doesn't matter at this point. Mm-hmm. So just taking that moment, because they needed that extra 10 minutes where I sat in the car with them and reminded them that I would pick them up and that we would be okay, and me to dry their tears and make jokes about the fact that I was getting these sweet and salty kisses because someone had maple syrup on their lips and the tears mixing in. And we needed that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So remembering why we're doing what we're doing. And I'm doing this to make them feel safe and happy, not to get them there on time.
Right.
Ultimately, to get them there on time, 100%. But
yeah,
that's not number one on the list of priorities.
Yeah. There are days when, like you said, things go south. And what do you do when things go sideways and aren't exactly happening the way they expect them to? You need to prioritize the relationships in your family first. Mm-hmm. Even if the caregiver or the caretaker, care place gets a little upset, better to leave with the house with all the relationships intact and everybody in a better space than to push through it and drop them off in a grumpy space. Yeah.
They need to feel like the relationships and the safety in, for us, the home, the physical dwelling matters, because if I had said, just go, you're already in the car, bye, love you, bye, and just like give an air kiss to the car in general and sent them off, I don't even know how drop off would have gone. I have a big feeler. I call him my big feeler. And I guarantee you his entire snowsuit would have ended up in a puddle because he would have been mad and just thrown things. But this way, I don't know. I haven't actually checked in yet because my husband hasn't come home yet. But I have a feeling that maybe it wasn't perfectly smooth, but it was smoother than it would have been had I not taken that 10 minutes, because then they were able to like ground. It's okay. I'm not sending you off to the wolves. Daddy's dropping you off and I will pick you up. We got this, right? Yeah.
And the extra time that you took there also made it a better morning for your husband. Because he didn't have a major breakdown with all the kids going crazy at the drop off. So your pause and taking a moment to make things good, introduce a tiny little bit of humor, let everybody just kind of pause and let the emotions relax for a moment, ended up being a gift for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And those are the little things we lose sight of in the busy, because our calendars can get so full and can be packed back to back to back to back. And it happens.
Yes.
It happens to me. There's so many times where I'm looking and I'm going, I thought we were having a quiet weekend. Why is there so much on the calendar? Mm-hmm. We do it to ourselves all the time. Mm-hmm. But pulling back and reflecting on what is my mission, that whole start with the end in mind. I never understood that saying until relatively recently, start with the end in mind. But what is my goal? To have good relationships in a cohesive home. Mm-hmm. Sending them off upset is not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Spot on. I think one of the things that kind of goes hand in hand with that is the expectations we have for each other. Mm-hmm. And we probably could have an entire podcast just on that topic. Because I had a conversation I was having with a friend a couple months back, and she was telling me about all the things she was upset about with her husband currently. And then in the same breath, she was telling me right after that about all the things she was doing for her son, which were exactly the same things that her husband wasn't doing. And she wasn't mad at her kid for the fact that she had to fill in the gaps that he was offering, but she was mad at her husband for all the gaps that she had to fill in, which were the same gaps. It was really ironic. And I said to her, I said, would you be this upset with your son if he did those things? She's like, well, no, he's my son. I'm like, well, what if you loved your husband the way you're loving your son? Give him a little bit of grace and love him through that the way you love your kids. And it was kind of maybe I stepped in where I shouldn't, but she's a really good friend. So, we have the relationship where I can kind of say some of those things. But she was like, oh, I never thought about loving my husband the way I love my children. But I think if we can love our kids and our spouses with that same kind of grace and forgiveness and not expect the big kids to be any more perfect than the smaller kids. Because when it comes down to it, I think we're all just big kids. I think that will do a great number to bring our cohesiveness and our families together as well.
Yeah.
It's so important because at the end of this life, you're not going to be worried about whether or not those kids showed up on time for that outdoor activity. You're not going to care. You're going to care that your kids, all 4 of them, love you and trust you and know that mom is going to be there to make things, not only good, but you're there to teach them on how to take a highly emotive situation and bring it down to a place of peace. That's a beautiful lesson you also taught them.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the goal, is to teach them. We always want better for our kids, but we always think of it as like, we want them to have a bigger house or less debt or like whatever. We always think of it in those terms. And I'm not perfect, but I'm really trying to reframe it into thinking like, I want them to not be as insecure as I was. And I want them to just have more confidence to try things than I was. And, that sort of thing that wasn't in me. We're always worried about not transferring our fear of spiders to our children and just like, okay, I can do this. I can kill the spider. Don't let them know I'm afraid so they don't get afraid. But it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, you're right. It's teaching them the tools that they need to own themselves, like we were saying a few minutes ago, own themselves and to love themselves. And all of those pieces are learned behaviors that we have to learn either from watching someone else do it or from from them telling us how to do it, right? Hearing how they do it. Yeah. I love seeing the pendulum move back, that people are starting to really embrace this beautiful picture of what a homespun life is like. And I think your podcast is just spot on to give people a resource amongst many that you will offer, but at least one on your podcast to be able to know, how do I start? How do I make game night intentional? And how do I put things first in my family? How do I start a garden? And so tell us when your podcast is launching or if it already has, and some of that.
Yeah, it came out on November 20th. It comes out every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. But it's every Monday. And it's a wild ride of conversations with real people just about how we can make the magic of the home big. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I assume they can find that on almost like where they typically would find podcasts.
It is currently on, it's anywhere you can find a podcast, it should be there.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
How about if they want to get in touch with you personally, if they have any way that they'd like to reach out to you, ask questions, how can they find you?
Yeah. So I am on Facebook. I have a Facebook group that I can send you the link for if you can pop it in the show notes, and then people can find me any of those places.
Awesome. So we'll make sure all of that information's in the notes so people can find you, because I just think having a home that is beautiful and welcoming and lively and not perfect, but messy. Exactly. Yeah. Messy is okay. I just, I love that you were able to do your dream and that your mission of being a mom, and that you're being true to yourself and being able to execute all these different things by experimenting and trying new things. It's really actually quite encouraging to see someone just go for it and acknowledge that it'll be messy, acknowledge that it may not be perfect, but you're learning along the way and having a great time as you do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So before we wrap up, couple final questions for you. What is one thing that's bringing you the most joy right now?
Slowing down with my family. We're heading into winter. I'm in in British Columbia, so we definitely have seasons. And it is snowy, and I always enjoy when the slowdown comes and it gets quiet and silly, and we just are inside more, and we've got hot teas by the hot fire, and it's just I love the slowdown season. I love all the seasons, but I'm always really ready for the slowdown season when it comes. That's what I call winter, the slowdown season.
The slowdown season. That's a good way to look
Yeah.
at it, where you're inside more and it's darker out more and all
Mhm.
that. Okay. And my final question, since you've learned so much throughout your journey, and it's just so fun to see and hear about the things that you've done, what if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self? What might you tell her?
That is such a good question. I think I would say trust yourself. Did a lot of second guessing along the way, and I mostly ended up where I thought I would end up anyway,
Okay.
but I think it would have been a lot less painful. And I mean, maybe that's painful sometimes isn't part of the journey, right? But I think it would have been a lot less painful and if I had just trusted myself. So
Yeah, and that's a journey of learning how to do that too. Sometimes we trust ourselves when we make mistakes, and sometimes we trust ourselves when we make the right choice, but
but the mistakes are part of it.
mistakes are part of it. Yeah. Wow. Wonderful. Well, Kathryn, again, thank you so much for your time today. It was just always is delightful having conversations with you, and we are absolutely going to have you back next time. You can teach me how to grow garlic.
Sounds great. I look forward to
figure it out together.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Kathryn.
Thanks, Lisa.
I told you Kathryn had a beautiful soul. There are 6 great takeaways here. I'll summarize them for you. Number 1, you cannot fill your cup if you have nothing to fill it with. So we do need to cultivate safety for ourselves and our kids and build a home that we're happy to come home to, and aim to feel at home in that space as well as in our own bodies, so we can then create the magic that comes from a great family life that'll fill our cups and fill them overflowing. Number 2, not everybody's meant for everything. So some people garden, some people take care of animals, some people like to can things, and others don't. The important thing is to give yourself permission to experiment. Be willing to make some mistakes and enjoy the journey. Number 3, if you're considering buying your produce and animal products from a local farmer, take that important step to reach out, introduce yourself, and get to know your local farmers. It's the best way to truly understand and connect with the food that you're consuming, and it'll help your local farmers feel more connected as well. Number 4, know your family's goals. What's most important to your family? If your family goals are to have good relationships and a cohesive home, then keep those priorities center stage and don't let a little thing derail your day from the more important themes. Number 5, choosing to be a mom and a homemaker is a high calling. Do not be deceived by a society that worships the almighty dollar. Working outside of the home is not the only valuable option. Working inside the home will pay ongoing, never-ending dividends from joy and the fulfillment you get, knowing and raising responsible, high-integrity kiddos who have a strong work ethic, who are grounded, confident, and equipped to contribute to their future families and the country in which we all live. And finally, number 6, relationships are what make everything happen. So remember to invest in the relationships inside your home as much as you care about and are concerned about the relationships outside your home. Don't spend all your energy impressing the boss, coworkers, the teacher, the coach, the boyfriend, or the girlfriend. Remember to save some of that energy and pour time into your parents, your siblings, your kids, your husband or wife, and yourself. Toxic relationships will create a toxic life. Pour into yourself and your family with lots of patience, lots of grace, and unlimited forgiveness. Thank you for listening today. And if you enjoyed today's podcast episode, please share it with your friends and family members. And also, right here, wherever you're listening or watching this episode, you could write a quick review. As a newly launched podcast, those reviews really help us. Finally, stay tuned for more information about my next round of Fast, Pray, Heal. In this digital course, we'll learn about the ancient tool of fasting in its various forms, prepare our homes and our minds to take on an amazing adventure, and then conduct that guided fast together as a community, supporting each other to find breakthroughs we never realized were possible. What an adventure! For more information or to sign up for the waiting list, please head over to my website at lisaroers.com. Thanks again for listening today. God bless and make it a great week.